Welcome to another episode of The Download. I have an exciting chat today with a guy that I've just met named Brian DeMint. I've heard him on a couple podcasts talking about wealth and mostly Bitcoin. And I just can't wait to get into all these things, biblical wealth, and how we think about money, and then how we think about this financial crisis that potentially is coming and how Bitcoin will potentially be the solution for that. And he's got a great book on the subject called Bitcoin Evangelism, which I'm excited to hear about and everybody should pick up. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What did I miss in the intro? Give us a little bit of your background.
That was great. That actually probably makes me sound better than I actually am. I'm far less interesting than deserving an intro. So I'm an entrepreneur from the age of 22. I'm 39 now. So I actually, in my adult life, I've never really worked for somebody. So I'm probably a terrible employee, but I'm an okay entrepreneur, I guess. And so my wife and I started a wellness company called Salt and Light Wellness when we were right out of college, and we still do that to this day. We've entered, you hear that term, people say you're an overnight success, but you said it's 10 years in the making. For us, it's like 17 years in the making. We've been doing this wellness thing for a long time, and we're just now getting to the point where our brand in terms of in the wellness space is just kind of catching on, and we're getting all sorts of inquiries for licensing locations and stuff, which is not something that was like a part of our expansion plan. But just the way that God provides is like, well, all of a sudden, because there's so much interest in wellness, there's so much interest in taking care of yourself, which we'll probably talk about somewhat today. It crosses over a lot with Bitcoin. Some of the greatest interest in my wellness business has come from writing books and speaking at conferences and talking on podcasts about Bitcoin. Bitcoiners are inherently people that once you question what's in your money, you tend to question what's in your food. Or some people go the other way. Some people question what's in their food, and then they start to ask what's in their money. It's a two-way door. But it's been really cool to see how those two things cross-pollinate each other. Yeah, I feel like the wellness business has been this overnight success that's 17 years in the making. The Bitcoin thing has been tremendous. And I'll tell you what, like the book, I'm really bad at pointing to things when I'm on camera. Bitcoin Evangelism, I wrote it 3 years ago. It started out as a 5-page PDF because every time there was a bull run, I would get friends from, whatever high school, or you get the friends from coming out from the woodwork, and they would text you or they'd Facebook message you and say, hey, can you explain Bitcoin to me in a message? And I'm like, I can't that's a lot to put in a text message, right? So I started I realized I was answering the same questions over and over and over, and I wanted people to understand it. So I wrote this book, or I wrote this 5-page PDF for frequently asked questions that turned into 10 pages. And then I got rolling at 10 pages. I'm like, I think I'm just going to write a book out of this. The cool thing about technology nowadays is you don't have to ask permission to start a podcast. You don't have to ask permission to publish a book on Amazon. And so little like random entrepreneur guy that had learned about Bitcoin and found ways to kind of orange pill people in real life with just the normal questions without sounding overly sophisticated. I read at a 5th grade level, so to write something at a 5th grade level just seemed to make sense. And I think that's how most people want Bitcoin explained, is at the 5th grade level. And so the book has taken off, been successful. At one point, it was it was number 1 on Amazon in the world on inflation.
Wow.
And so I've never been number 1 in the world at anything. And so like the fact that, in a very small subsection of the book market, it could like place its corner. Just very cool that it started as an act of love for my friends and family. And then it turned into this thing that I've gotten to travel around the world and speak on it. And, probably the reason why I'm here getting to talk to you today, a brother in Christ.
That's right.
It's opened more doors in terms of my personal network of believers than I ever thought before. So it's been cool. That's my super long version of the introduction. But it's I get to do
that
cool
was awesome.
things now because of it.
I've got like a whole podcast of questions for you now just from that.
There we go. Yeah.
So I have a concept that it's obvious, but I talk about a lot is when you like thinking about how to serve the world in a way that you're going to get value back, meaning, money usually, is seeing that problem. Oh my. So one problem that I see in my life is in Santa Barbara, there all of our landscapers are so you can't trust them. They're not going to show up. There's so many issues, and I keep having this. Man, I should start a landscaping business because this problem. I just want to solve the problem for myself and my friends, and it's like such an entrepreneurial thing, right? That it's like you see how Brian saw that problem with his friends, and he was like, "How can I? Okay, this is going to take a lot of my time. How can I turn this into a thing where I can really give a lot of value?" And then it's like cascading into this whole thing, and it was a side business. This was a side thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was. I had no intention of making money on the book. It was. I was gonna publish this book on Amazon because anybody can do it. Like if you have a concept for a book and you want to take the time to sit down and write a book, absolutely go ahead and do it. And nobody's going to stop you from publishing it on Amazon. And even if it was a backdoor way, because my thought was, I was the youngest elder at my church. When I was in my 20s, that invited me onto the elder board, which is not typical for our church. It's usually older guys, and that's how it's probably supposed to be. But that's the first group of people that I was really trying to overtly convince. Like I had orange pilled people that were asking about Bitcoin. That's a little bit easier when somebody's reaching out. But I'm like, well, the only reason I'm on this board is it's got to be because I'm the Bitcoin guy. Like I have no other wisdom to bestow upon these men that are much wiser than I. And so that was the first time that I really tried to proactively orange pill people. And I remember the guy that was taking over as the senior pastor of our church. So our older senior pastor, who was like in his 70s, was retiring. And there was a 5-year plan, a succession plan that actually one of my good friends, one of my dear friends that I served in ministry with for 10 years, we were about the same age. He was going to be taking over as the next lead pastor of the church. And I remember I'm like, I got to convince him. So if I convince him, then obviously, that helps convince some leadership in the church. And it kind of personally convinced him, but he was like, you know what? I'm not in a position like to lead the church towards holding and all Bitcoin. He's like, I can't really put my reputation on the line as I'm like taking over in this new leadership role. He goes, but you keep saying there's this problem, there's this inherent problem with our monetary system, and we have a good relationship. We can shoot really straight with each other. And he said, and one time I'm just complaining. He's like, he hates complainers. And he goes, Brian, I'm sick of hearing you complain about this like fiat, whatever you're talking about. He's like, what are you doing about it? It was like a challenge. It was like a flex. We were like legitimately arguing, but like, I remember thinking like, oh, that's a good way to challenge one of your friends. Like, what are you doing about it other than trying to convince like a room of people? I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to go write a book, and I'm going to like try to make it people around the world know about this so that when I come back to my church, and if you see in the dedication of the book, it says to the church, it's to my church. And so I wrote this book. And so I didn't have, as the young guy in the church and like this, the crazy Bitcoiner guy, I didn't have a lot of credibility. So I thought, I'm going to go out to the world and get some credibility. And as soon as my friends and the people at church see that I'm like speaking at these conferences in Portugal, well, why do these people on the other side of the planet care what I have to say about money and finance? But then the people who I go to church with every Sunday, why don't they care? So that was part of the genesis. That was part of what lit a spark under me to write the book, was to convince other people of Bitcoin, but then ultimately to come back and be like, hey, church, like other people are paying attention. Now we pay attention. So since then, we've rewritten our bylaws so we can accept Bitcoin. We can hold Bitcoin. Everybody on the finance team. I'm still on the finance team at my church now, which I think is awesome that I went from being on the board. They're like, okay, your term's done on the elder board, but now we want you crazy Bitcoiner guy as like one of the finance team guys. And so the fact that they intentionally invited a Bitcoiner onto the finance team was pretty cool to make financial recommendations to what we're supposed to do. So it worked. Like all I can say is by God's grace and challenging from a brother, the plan worked. And if the book sells no more copies, that's fine. It accomplished its mission. It's gone on to I found this out the other day, just from the people that have reached out to me to say like how much they've accreted in value from the Bitcoin that they've bought because of the book. It's like over $100 million worth of like accretive value we've helped develop for people just from this one book right here. So just like 5-page PDF turned into 10-page PDF, turned into like a book that I just wanted to convince my church with. People around the world have made $100 million of wealth, and my church has, done okay. Well, so like There's literally nothing special about me. Like if you met me in my daily life, you'd be like, okay, you're pretty good at jiu-jitsu because I'm a jiu-jitsu nerd. Okay, he likes his kids. But like if we sat in a room and talked business, I'm gonna have a few good ideas. I'm gonna have a bunch of dumb ideas. I'm a very like nothing special about me guy. But when you challenge me and like you poke me and tell me like, well, prove it. Like put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to try and do that. So, and anybody can do that. That's the cool thing is literally anybody can do that. So going back to the original point, it's like, man, if you want to gain a little bit of legitimacy amongst your friend group, just go publish a book on Amazon and go spread it around the world and come back to your friends. And hopefully you'll have a little more gumption with them.
It's exactly what I'm doing with this podcast. Not like directly, like I want to go speak in my church or something, but it's the same concept of putting value out into the world, trying to have a conversation in the world that brings value. And then, it's funny because, right, Jesus said like, yeah, people aren't going to really listen to me in my hometown.
He did. Yep. They said that was the Nazarene. What good has ever come out of Nazareth, right? It's like just, yeah, he was diminished because of who he was, yeah, or where he came from. So silly.
Yeah. So that's been going on forever. So let's go back to, I want to understand, I know what orange pilling is, but what exactly is that? Like, why is it called orange pill? And, obviously I know it's convincing people that Bitcoin makes sense, what it is, why it exists, what problem it's solving, right? That's basically orange pilling. Why is it called orange pilling?
Yeah. And I know you know the answer to this, but for the audience, it goes back to the red pill versus blue pill of the matrix, right? Conservatives, we say, oh, we red pill somebody. Well, why do we say the red pill? Well, in the matrix, when Neo's given the choice between the red pill and the blue pill, it's not just that now his eyes are opened. There's like a really specific thing that Morpheus says to Neo. He says, once your eyes are opened, you cannot go back. So it's not just like, oh, try the red pill, and then if you don't like it, then we can give you the blue pill and we can go back to the way things were. It's like, no, once the scales have been lifted off of your eyes, there's just no going back. So the burden of truth, like I'm not telling you it's going to be sunshine and rainbows. When you wake up to the realities of the world, in that case, in the Matrix, it was that we're living in a simulation and the machines are in the real world. They're trying to kill us. When you wake up to that reality, the only thing you're getting is truth. I'm not promising you anything other than the truth. It's actually going to be a burden. You're going to have, because you know the truth, you're going to feel a conviction in your belly to actually live a certain way, to act a certain way, to fight the machines. And so with orange pilling, we think it's the same way. We all grew up, for whatever reason, accepting inflation. We all grew up, for whatever reason, accepting sickness and illness as just like, yeah, my body's supposed to be in chronic inflammation and my friends' kids are supposed to be autistic and, like I'm supposed to eat McDonald's processed food. Like we grew up in this system where we just kind of accepted it. And because nobody raised the alarm bells, we just went along with it. And I mean, there's all sorts of beautiful psychological case studies. In my second book, Parallel, we actually go over some of that. Like there's all sorts of case studies about like the smoke-filled room experiment. I don't know if you've ever heard of the smoke-filled room experiment.
No.
But it was the psychological study. All the best psychological studies were done in the 60s. Kind of strange, by the way, because it's like the 60s was like this big turning point when society got like extra manipulated. So if you go back to the 60s, all the best studies about human behavioral manipulation were done then. And the smoke-filled room was just this simple. They would sit a test subject down in the middle of like an office building. They'd say, here, take this test. And so the person thought they were just doing a psychological eval. They thought that that's why they were being paid for the experiment, just to, be evaluated on these questions. Well, everybody else was an actor in the room. And so there was a door, like basically the entrance door to the room was across from the test subject, and they would start to trickle smoke under the door. And he would see it. And when it was a little bit of smoke, he would just kind of look away, can go back to his work. As they pumped more smoke under the door, he would start to look around and nobody else. And all the actors were told, do not react to the smoke. No matter how bad the smoke gets, like we don't react until the guy reacts. And so what they studied with these subjects time and time again was that when everybody surrounding you doesn't react to something that's obviously bad, like smoke coming under the door and the rooms or the buildings on fire, if you look around and nobody else reacts, you don't want to face like the social isolation of being the doom and gloom guy that's like raising the alarm. You also get comforted by the fact that like, well, I want to finish my work right now. I don't want to disrupt what I'm doing. And so like, it's more convenient to keep going the way that we're going. And there's also this like burden of relief that when you do what everybody else is doing, that you don't bear the responsibility. Like Warren Buffett had this brilliant saying that people want to be lemmings. Like lemmings are these things that will fall off a cliff if other lemmings go off the cliff. People are okay with failing as long as they fail with the crowd. And so it's this idea that we will accept obvious danger. We will accept like imminent destruction of ourselves as long as everybody's okay with it. And so that's the world we grew up in. That's why we accept sickness and we accept inflation and we accept bad monetary policy and endless wars or whatever, all those things. And so orange pilling, when you take the orange pill, I think it's more profound than the red pill, because the orange pill wakes you up to the incentives of society. Why do social systems work a certain way? It comes down to the incentives. And what do we say? The love of money is the root of all evil. Well, everybody's pretty much on the same page that farm is corrupt. Everybody's up on the same page that big ag is corrupt, and all these like everybody would mostly agree, right? Would be like these big entities or big tech is very corrupt. But for whatever reason, we think that big money is like, oh, that must be the one institution that's fine. No. The most corrupt institution is the money institution. All the ones that we know are corrupt, those pale in comparison to how corrupt the central bank is, the money institution. And so once you realize the inherent flaws and the smoke that's coming under the door of the monetary institutions, we as soon as we can say, you know what, it's okay, or there's one other person that's alarmed, the orange pill is seeing that smoke under the door and doing something about it. It makes you maybe feel a little socially isolated because you're the only person in the room that's raising the alarm bell, but you have seen the smoke and you know there's a fire. And so that's essentially what the orange pill is. It's this awakening to the way that the world works and the inherent burden that comes with it, that you have to do something about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's sort of similar to the concept of, the frog getting boiled in the pot and it doesn't realize the water's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and then it dies, right? It doesn't realize. It's like, oh, this is it's sort of similar, right? Where you're in this world, you're in this matrix that you don't realize. But the smoke analogy is so cool because it's like we are being so influenced by everybody around us. It's like, oh, nobody else is freaking out, and so I guess this is fine, right? And that's where it's crypto and Bitcoin becomes such an education thing, where it's like we need to educate, and you're pushing up against this wall of like, no, things are not okay, right? And like and then you kind of end up being a doom and gloomer, or right, like you were saying in the analogy, you don't want to be that. And it's like I'm starting my the download is not specifically about Bitcoin, but this is my second Bitcoin episode because it seems inevitable. This is not something we can avoid, right? I sort of see there's going to be this, ruling class. We got you have the people who've saw this coming, right? So, sort of, I use the analogy of when I saw e-commerce, the transition from retail to e-commerce, I jumped in early, and that's how I had my big success. Was just seeing that a few years early, and we're at this stage where it's like, well, clearly in the last year we have had a ton of activity, right? So Trump and CBDCs and all these things, right? But you were in way earlier than that. You must have been like feeling like John the Baptist or something.
I've never looked at that analogy, but that's a hilarious analogy. Yeah, poor John the Baptist, like he had to come before Jesus because there's always
Yeah.
the lunatic fringe. And I think it's funny that like tech adoption, we talk about that. Like what's the the adoption chart? That first stage of any new tech, like the internet boom or the electricity boom or whatever, there's the lunatic fringe. There's like literally crazy people that propagate that get the word out, because you have to have some loon that's out there shouting in the wilderness that gets enough people to kind of laugh at them at first, but then you're like, wait, maybe there's something to that, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's strange that even God had to use he understands humans obviously better than anybody, but he understood that we as humans, we need a lunatic to shout about it at first, and then the saner minds, right? The highly convicted but very sane minds come along after that, and those are the ones that really, really benefit and pull in the harvest, whether it's Christ,
Yeah, I feel like
Christ.
when I'm talking about crypto and Bitcoin or whatever, like the majority of younger people get it to a degree. Not, they don't fully understand it at all, but they're like, when I say this, I say, doesn't it seem obvious that we are going to move from this, which is a half torn $20 bill that I tore during my podcast as a thing, to show how, money doesn't have any value. But we're moving from that to digital currency. Like, doesn't that feel obvious, right? That one feels obvious. And people are like, yeah, I guess you're probably right. Like that's probably, we're already doing it. We have credit cards. Like we don't even barely use dollars, right? So the next step is just like, okay, so it's not called dollars anymore, but it's like a digital thing, right? Like people can kind of start to understand that, but you do still feel like you're pushing against, this wall of like, dude, why do you have to, be so crazy? And it's like, well, because there's going to be such a transition that a whole generations of people are going to get stuck. They're going to get left behind.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's absolutely the case. And that's unfortunately what's going to happen. I think that's why we feel compelled, like I said, as part of that burden is to help people understand that, because we know that the people that we understand as early on as possible, they're going to benefit most greatly from it. There's going to be, I believe 10 years from now, people will be using Bitcoin in commerce, and we're going to be using it as regular money, or going to have the ability to, trade, between your stable coin. You can interchange between your dollar stable coins and your Bitcoin pretty easily. I think that's probably how the banks are going to try and run things. But once you adopt Bitcoin as money, once everybody's using it as money, then yes, I think Bitcoin, because of its finite nature, will go up in value over time. So the way we have inflation now, we will have perpetual deflation in Bitcoin, because any improvements to productivity in the marketplace, like AI and robotics, all those things, when you have a fixed money system, the increases in productivity increase the value of the entire economy. And if you're measuring an economy by 21 million, well, say your economy is 100 trillion and you divide that, your denominator is 21 million. Well, when the economy goes from 100 trillion to 200 trillion, but you keep the same denominator, the value of that denominator goes up, right? Like the individual units of Bitcoin go up because you're measuring the economy in 21 million. So Bitcoin will always go up perpetually. It won't go up at the rate that it's going up now. Like this is the window of time, the next 5 years probably, where Bitcoin is going to see crazy growth because of the adoption curve. We're still in the single digit percentages of people who have a working knowledge of Bitcoin, who have used it. I've gone to Bitcoin conferences where people at a Bitcoin conference, they paid $1,000 for a ticket, have never done a Lightning transaction before. And that's fine. Like it's not a judgment on those people. But the fact is, it's like these are the hardcore Bitcoiners, and they haven't used the simple technology that we use for transactional Bitcoin. Most Bitcoiners have only gotten to the buy and hold phase of Bitcoin, which is great. I want everybody to get there. If you get there, you're on third base, right? But rounding third and going home is starting to use Bitcoin as money. And I believe that's the next phase of people want to get ahead in Bitcoin. A lot of people say, oh, I'm going to go try and buy some XRP, or I'm going to buy some random meme coin or something like that, because that will grow faster than Bitcoin. I tell people all the time, if you want to get alpha in Bitcoin, if you want to outpace the market, just start spending in Bitcoin, start dealing in the Bitcoin economy, because in the fiat world, you hopefully, if you're doing it right, you have a certain amount of expenses in fiat. By the end of the month, if you're doing it right, you make more in fiat than you spend. You accrue more dollars if you're financially prudent. Same thing in Bitcoin. If you're spending sats in the Bitcoin economy, if you're spending pieces of Bitcoin in the Bitcoin economy, and you're providing value and you're accepting Bitcoin, you should be stacking more sats. Even though it's this paradoxical thing that even though you're spending sats, you're making economic connections. If you and I start to transact, you start to buy books and I start to pay for, advertising on your podcast and all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden, like I get plugged into all of your economic connections in Bitcoin, you get plugged into all of mine, and we start to, if we're providing value to the economy, we're actually stacking more sats in the economy. So anybody who's in Bitcoin already, so there's probably people in your audience right now that are like, yeah, I'm already in Bitcoin. Like I already hold Bitcoin. What do I do next? I would say that the next phase for that person is start to operate in the Bitcoin economy. Try to find places to spend Bitcoin. Tell people you accept Bitcoin. And, for anybody that hasn't started, don't let that be a roadblock. Like, oh my gosh, that sounds so complicated. I'm not even in Bitcoin. Now Brian's telling me to spend Bitcoin. Don't worry about that then. Just buy and hold some Bitcoin. But I'm talking about those people that are already on third base. They're already in scoring position. Like you want to flesh this thing out. Like that's the next phase for a lot of people. And when people start thinking like that, as you mentioned, people go from being stagnant to forward thinking. How do I get ahead in this next phase? Every generation has people that were left behind. I don't want my friends and family and my church to be the ones who are left behind.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel the same way. I had a short conversation with my pastor a couple of weeks ago about putting some of their cash into Bitcoin. It was like never occurred to them at all, not even close. So how would you help a Christian who's kind of like, they've heard of it, they don't own any, and they're kind of like, but this thing is so volatile, and so I'm going to lose all my money, and they think about it that way, right? Or they're like, how does this fit into my faith? And like, it does feel like, who created this, and are they good? Is this you know what I mean? Like, how do you wrestle with that question? Obviously, I'm sure you've had that conversation with your church, right? Because they're like, wait a second, is this like evil? What is this?
Yeah. Well, first, in regards to the conversation with your pastor for the church holding it, the tact I took, anytime they would give me the opportunity to present, like if I had a slide deck and I'm presenting to them, the case I'm always trying to make is because it's like, what is the church goal with money or cash that they hold on hand, right? Because they're supposed to be fiduciaries of the congregation giving them money. So what they're most concerned about is not making a ton of more money off the investment. They're trying to make sure that they don't, for lack of a better term, piss the congregation's money away, right? Like we're trying not to be bad fiduciaries of this money. We're trying to be good stewards of this money that we've been entrusted with operating. Okay, so that's the framework. That's the thing that needs to speak to these people. And I agree that that's the way they should be thinking. When you are in cash, you are bleeding money. So people should not give you money if you're to hold it and do nothing with it, and it's going to lose value. You are being a bad steward of that money because it's not just losing 2%. We know it's losing more than that. Granted, most people on finance teams and boards are going to be awake to the fact that, yes, inflation is higher than what the CPI report is saying. And so you can really strike that nerve with them and say, like, people should not give us money to hold. They should only give us enough money to pay the church's light bill and to pay the salaries, and then they shouldn't give us any more because we're being bad stewards. If we're holding any of that cash, we are losing their money. We're losing God's money, bleeding it dry. On the flip side, Bitcoin, because of its finite nature, does not have that inherent problem. Why, when somebody gives us dollars, why does it get bled dry over a 20-year period? Why, if we held their money for 20 years, why would we lose almost all of its value? Because of its infinite nature, because we have no way to stop how much of it's being produced, and we don't know how much is being produced right now. We have these reports called M2 money supply. Do you really believe that that's how much money there is in the world? I don't, because I think, again, the most corrupt institutions in the world are the central banks. Are they highly incentivized to lie and to cheat? They are. And so that institution is an inherently corrupt and thieving institution. What types of institutions did Jesus inherently not like? The one group of people that he showed righteous anger to were the temple money changers, people in God's house taking advantage fiscally of people. Jesus thought that that was a big enough deal that he made a whip and he violently assaulted people.
Yep.
And so, and
people think that it's, they think that it's because they were doing, they're doing business in the church. That's bad. But it actually was dishonest business.
It was dishonest business.
Right? That was the issue. He was like, and this is all through the Bible. He talks about, dishonest scales and taxation. And it's like, I want to do this study on why were there so many mentions of tax collectors? One of his disciples was a tax collector, or multiple, right? And then you have all these stories of he has these encounters with tax collectors. I haven't met a tax collector in my life. Why is that in the Bible so much? And I think my hunch is that is one of the main ways that we're being stolen. It's one of the main dishonesties in our world is tax. And that's why Jesus talked about it so much. And that's why he redeemed, was it Matthew that was a tax collector? Yeah. Right. I want to dig into that because I think there's a lot there, but I think you're right. And people don't realize it because it's sort of hidden. I read a book called Lords of Money. Have you read this? Yeah. And just talking about how the Fed was created and this whole thing, it's so dark and evil and corrupt. And I hear a lot of people talk about when they're trying to sort of convince somebody about Bitcoin, you got to start with the problem. People don't understand the problem. They're the frog in the water, and they don't realize it's going to boil soon. They're the people in the room with the smoke, and and everyone else is acting like the smoke's normal, right? And so you gotta start with the problem. It's like you don't even realize it. You gotta notice that ribeye was $9.99 like a year ago, and now it's $15.99. Do you not notice this? Sorry to cut you off. You continue on with what you were saying.
By the way, since we started talking, I've been, I've checked out a few of your episodes, and like now my Instagram or my YouTube feed, you pop up frequently. I love your take on things. So this is great, man.
Thank you. Awesome.
Don't feel like I shouldn't have the floor. Like I told you, man, if there's an exceptional person here, I think you're the exceptional one, and I'm just getting to be
dude, when you were like, I'm not that smart, I'm not that good at anything, I'm over here thinking the same thing. I say that all the time. There's something, I'm unemployable as well. And it was like, it's a superpower once you realize like, oh, yeah, the whole education system was created, the current one that in the world, right? Like public schools and whatever, were to create factory workers, right? And it was like, that just system never made sense to me. It's just like, and you and I are unemployable, and we have this, like, we're not that intellectual, right? We're just kind of regular guys, but we have these gut instincts, and the Holy Spirit tells us, speaks to us, and then we just take action. We're simple. We take action. And it's like, that's all it is. I talk to people all the time who are like overthinking, and they're all this stuff. And it's like, you and I are dumb enough not to do that.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. So dumb. I don't necessarily always know the consequences, but yeah, you have to, I think you have to live a little fearless. We should return to that conversation though, for sure. The education system, building factory workers, and even to the church, how dishonest that's what it was structured for. So is that the system you want to follow into an era where being a worker is irrelevant? I mean, the AI era, it's like those same people that developed that education system, their heirs of being the lords of finance are the ones that were developing the robots that are going to take the jobs of the people the roles they educated you into. So that we should definitely return to. But yeah, just on this idea of the church and like, how do you morally make that case to a Christian? I mean, aside from that, Jesus has a special place in his heart for honest scales. And so that's the one that I will quote. I'll always close the show out with that. That's the last slide is if God cares about honest scales, okay, I'm about to ask you men who have successful businesses, and you guys are much smarter than me when it comes to personal finance and all these things. You guys have, you guys have a very good understanding of money and how the world works. How many dollars are in existence right now? And nobody can answer it. They might try to Google the M2 money supply, but I'm like, well, what about M1 money supply? What about how many are in treasuries? Because that's essentially a call option on dollars that are to be printed. So what is the number? We don't know. The fact is, we do not know. There's a man in a room with a keyboard that can change it at any second. So that's one system. Okay, that's one side of the scale. The other side of the scale is 21 million. I can tell you factually, programmatically, mathematically, in every provable way that on Bitcoin, there's 21 million. Which is the dishonest scale, right? Which is the side of the scale that is dishonest? So if God cares about honest scales, there's one system that's transparent. There's one system that is incredibly opaque, and it's responsible for funding the people who put out government programs that you would probably disagree with when it comes to abortion and when it comes to all the things about, in terms of unjust wars and all the things that we would, as Christians, that we would oppose from a political position. That financial institution, that central bank, enables those things. So aside from its lack of transparency, it's also the mechanism that allows us to go to war even when the people haven't paid taxes for that war. Like if you had to tax us every time we go to war, we're only going to go to war for things that every citizen agrees on. Like, okay, is somebody invading our borders? Yes, tax me. I will pay so that my kids don't get shot by rockets, right? But am I going to pay taxes voluntarily for you guys to go over and do drone strikes so that we can get oil rights or something like that? No, I'm not going to pay taxes for that. So when you can't tax the people for a war, the central bank can then give the military industrial complex money to go over and launch bombs and things like that. So everything that we see that's just violent in this world is paid for by central bank pieces of paper. And so that's the case I would make to people. So aside from say you don't understand Bitcoin, but if all you understand is that it's honest and integrity driven, then that should be enough of a case as a Christian. Even if it's volatile, perceived volatile, I would say.
So what makes it? I understand the 21 million. So there's 21 million. There'll never be more. There's only 21 million. It's being mined. You can just think of it's being dug up from the ground, right? It's the same thing as mining gold. It's being mined over time, and 20 million are mined, right? There's a million left.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's going to take a long time to mine these last million. I understand. So that makes sense to me. So there's only going to be this finite number. It's secure because of, I don't know how to explain it. You can explain why it's secure. And, everyone always says, well, quantum computing could take it over, or the government could, try to make it illegal or something, right? So help me think through how this is safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are different security things that we would answer to. Each one has its own answer. So could governments make it illegal? In short, I would just say that there's been plenty of governments that have made it illegal, and China made it illegal 11 times. Well, to me, that only serves as proof of how anti-fragile Bitcoin is, because why did China, the most technologically tyrannical government in human history, the most capable government ever of making something digital illegal, why did they have to make it illegal 10 more times? They had to ban it 10 more times because the first times didn't work, right? Every time they banned it, it continued to be used, right? You cannot ban it. Even if you have the world's superpower in technology, you cannot ban Bitcoin. So that's that. I mean, it's even if governments do it. So what is the stance China's taking on Bitcoin right now? They're taking an amicable stance. How do we make money from it? How do we tax it and stuff? That's going to be government's best way to participate in Bitcoin, is to tax it and to make our lives kind of well, now I got to pay taxes on my Bitcoin.
Okay. And that's kind of, it's similar to what Trump is doing, right? He's he was kind of anti, and then he's wait a second, this is inevitable. And because it's inevitable, America's got to be first, right? That's in a nutshell, right?
Yep.
So it's sort of a similar, for the last decade, they've been fighting it, or longer, right? 14 years or whatever. Yeah. Everyone's been fighting it. And it's sort of in the last, 6 months become kind of like, it's actually pretty safe now. Like, it's sort of like proven. You can say like, these things have happened. We have legislation, Genius Act, and different things, which, there's a lot to go into there, which maybe we won't do. But, right, it feels like this is the safest time ever to get into Bitcoin.
I can't see anything in the near future that is going to be a problem for Bitcoin in terms of adoption. Like, we have pretty clear runway to grow this network and the acceptance of it, where we have government tailwinds. Bitcoin's gotten to over 100,000 with government headwinds. Now we have tailwinds in Bitcoin. I think the coming bull markets that we're going to see are going to be unlike anything we've seen before. So, I mean, I'm incredibly bullish on Bitcoin. But going back to, those questions of security, I think those are things. By the way, when somebody asks these questions, like if a friend's asking these questions, or somebody's even kind of being adversarial, like, oh, I think the government's just going to ban. I used to say those same things. I used to call Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme. I used to call it a pyramid scheme. I think that the skeptical mind should say those things. As a Christian, I was too young to like call myself an atheist, I guess, because I came to know Christ when I was in 8th grade. But before that, I had some objections to why I wasn't a Christian, because they would be kind of tinged atheistic. Well, like, once those things got answered, I become a much more ardent defender of the faith, because I had really tough questions that needed to be answered about why would a loving God allow evil to occur, those types of things. Once I believed that there was a sufficient answer to that, it emboldened my faith to go a little bit deeper. So the people who ask the toughest questions of Bitcoin are the Bitcoiners of tomorrow. They're the orange pillars of tomorrow, because those questions have sufficient answers. And if that person's intellectually and honest, then they will become a Bitcoiner. So to that other point about the safety of Bitcoin, why can't somebody just plant a bug in the Bitcoin code and then start taking everybody's money? Well, that's the beauty of why we say Bitcoin's a decentralized network. Most people just hear that word and it sounds like a buzzword. No, it's actually decentralized is a huge part of the security measure of Bitcoin. Right now in my office, you can't see, but right behind my computers, I have Bitcoin miners and I have nodes running. No, we'll keep it simple to nodes. Don't even worry about the miner part. I talked about it. But every node is a computer around the world that is running the Bitcoin code. There's not a central Bitcoin server somewhere. There's not even a set of Bitcoin servers. There's guys like me. Nobody knows where my office is right now, right? Like, I just randomly, and I'm more visible than most people. There's lots of guys that are just shadowy supercoders in a hole somewhere that have Bitcoin nodes running. And so unless you are able to infiltrate every single one of our physical locations, which no one knows where everybody is that's running a Bitcoin node, if you can't infiltrate every physical location and put malicious software on every Bitcoin node, then you aren't hacking the Bitcoin node. If you just hacked my node right now, so my computer that's running the Bitcoin code, if you just hacked mine, well, there's this thing called consensus. And so every 10 minutes, when a block is mined, all of the nodes around the world, we all say, hey, check my math. Are my answers correct? Well, all of the other computers in the world that are running Bitcoin, they would see mine that has a bug on it, and they would say, no, we all have the same answer. You have some weird Fugazi answer, and we're not accepting that. So consensus is what drives the Bitcoin network, and any malicious bad actor. So if I'm trying to use my computer to cheat the network, or if somebody's infiltrated and put a bug on my computer, it just doesn't become part of the consensus. And so that's the beauty of decentralization, is that we kind of lost faith in consensus after COVID because that word's been hijacked. It's like there's a scientific consensus that the COVID vaccine is safe and effective. That's not the kind of consensus we're talking about. We're talking about a mathematical consensus. It's not like, hey, 10 doctors were surveyed and this is their opinion on something. It's more like, hey, we all added up 2 + 2. We found that it equals 4. And there's one guy that's saying 2 + 2 = 6. And so we're gonna kick him out of this round. His answer is not going to count. And we're going to go with what everybody else says is 2 + 2 = 4, because we were able to mathematically prove it and agree with the others in the group. So that's more how the Bitcoin consensus works.
if you think about COVID, for example, like you mentioned, all right, we're not supposed to say that on YouTube, are we?
Yeah,
When you
I'm
think
sorry.
about,
Bleep it out, please.
yeah, the C word that we won't mention, um, they were silencing doctors that were saying, wait a second, something's not right here, right? That was being silenced. And it was from the top down. They were saying, this is what it is, and just believe us. And so that's what you're saying is like, the Fed, for example, we don't know what they're doing. They're not open about how much money they're printing, or, we don't, sometimes they tell, but it seems like there's not clarity on how they're doing it, what they're doing, and why. And it's the power in the oligarchs, and the most powerful are just like deciding what happens. And with Bitcoin, it's the opposite. It's random guys like Brian running what I would call a server, right? A node is sort of like a server,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good way.
Yeah. So a node is sort of like a server. He's running it, and a bunch of other people all over the world are running this system. So it's decentralized. So there isn't somebody at the top who can just print more. It's a system that has that. What was the word?
Decentralization? Or,
Yeah.
or consensus?
Yeah. The consensus.
Yeah.
There's this consensus, but it's in the hands of the people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so intriguing and beautiful. And we believe, Brian and I believe, it's Christ-like. We believe it's biblical to have the power with the people rather than being told that this is the truth or whatever from the powers that be.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to say it. And I mean, it's great because like you said, it's biblical in the sense that we can contribute to it. We can benefit from it. And I think that's the way the world works, is like we aren't supposed to sit idly by. I think scripture is pretty clear that if we want there to be fruit in our lives, like, we're supposed to get up and work. And so Bitcoin network, there's a term called proof of work. The Bitcoin network only operates because computers around the world provide work for it. And just one more touch on that security measure of it is, like, there's a financial incentive to not cheat Bitcoin, because going back to it, like, for me to run my node or my server right now, it costs money. It costs electricity. I had to buy the equipment and stuff. And if I'm constantly trying to put in bad information into the Bitcoin network, it's only costing me money because it's getting disregarded. So I'm paying money to be a bad actor and not getting any money from it. So it's actually there's no financial incentive for me to cheat Bitcoin in that way. And so because of that, it's actually very financially secure, because there's no incentive to cheat Bitcoin, because the way that you would try to cheat it is to pass bad information, but that's always going to lose to the consensus. And so it's kind of like a truth mechanism. Sorry, this is my big point of bringing it back full circle, is if we as Christians care about what's true, I mean, you can't get more true than Bitcoin's ledger. It has absolute certainty in whose money belongs to who. And if I send money to somebody, I can't take it back. I can't rescind it. I can't cheat somebody out of the money that I sent them. I can't duplicate it. I can't fake it. Where, again, in the monetary system that we live in, Jesus would have never tolerated this. It's so much more akin to the temple money changers that were giving bad exchange rates. That's the bad business practice that these guys were doing. And I think that it's worth even just going back and revisiting that for a second, is that, for anybody who doesn't know, that it was during the time of the Passover that Jesus is there. And so you have a lot of foreigners, a lot of people coming back to the temple to participate in the Passover. Now, these are people coming from other countries or other jurisdictions, and so they were bringing with them coins from around the Roman Empire. Well, when you went to the temple, you weren't allowed to pay in pagan money. So you would have to go to a money changer. Like, so if you were to go into the temple to bring your sacrifice, you had to pay with the Jewish shekel. Well, you had to go to the money changers to get the Jewish shekel.
Right.
And so what the money changers would say is like, hey, guess what? I know, as any good salesman knows, I know my leverage right here. You have a chicken right there, and you need to go sacrifice it at the temple, or you're not going to go to heaven. So I can, instead of giving you a 1-to-1 exchange rate like I should, give me 12-to-1. Like I know that your soul hangs in the balance, So I'm going to take advantage of that. And that's the type of monetary system that existed. That's the type of monetary system that the financial scam that Jesus railed against. I think the fiat monetary system, while it's not necessarily saying, hey, I know your soul hangs in the balance, it doesn't have that element, but it's a much more prolific scam by orders of magnitude. It's a much bigger scam, and it's taking much greater advantage of people than the temple money changers ever could imagine. So if Jesus railed against that system, he would certainly, I believe, rail against our system today. And so as a Christian, I want Bitcoin to go up in value. I want to become wealthier from it. That's fine. But more than, and this is genuinely true, more than my personal net worth going up, because I think I made a good financial decision buying and holding Bitcoin. More than that, I don't want people being robbed every single day.
Yeah.
Like, that drives me crazy.
It drives me crazy too. And it's happening constantly. And there's so many ways people are getting robbed, right? There's taxation in so many different ways. And our country was founded with no income tax. People don't even realize this, right? It's like the taxes are absolutely insane. When you tell people that they are going to spend their biggest expense in the world in their whole life is tax, and it's 50%. So I was just talking to a buddy. He's an actor, and he is going to make a big chunk of money this year doing a show. He's going to make $1 million. And he had not thought once about the tax implications of that. And I was like, dude, you're going to pay $400,000. This year, it's insane. It's insane. Actually, I talked to a buddy who also was exiting a company for, lots of money, tens of millions of dollars. And he also hadn't considered tax. And so it's like, it's not even we're not even talking about inflation in that situation. It's like, it's so insane. It's so insane. We are in the matrix. We are in a cage. And the problem is the people who are running it, the people who have the power, who are pulling the strings, they do not have our values. They do not have our best in mind. And it's just, we've seen it so clearly with COVID, the different. So I always think about the financial, was it 2008? The banks that caused all of this drama, the banks that were doing all the shady lending, were bailed out. Like it's crazy. And you know who bailed them out? Us. The people, we bailed them out. That's the only way it works.
So twisted. We
bailed them out because they printed more money. And the only way that they're paying for that is by raising the cost of things. It's crazy. So we're living in this super corrupt time in America, in the world. And Bitcoin is a way of, I was going to say hedging, but it's almost more than hedging. It's like, it's a way of extracting yourself from the matrix and saying, okay, I see it. I see it, and I'm going to do something about it. I am going to. So one of the Bible verses that really inspired the download was, I grew up as a Christian, went to Wheaton College. I'm just like total, I'm like just mainline, just your typical evangelical dude. My parents were in ministry, the whole thing. My grandfather was a pastor. And I never heard the verse. There's so many verses I never heard. I put this video out online that was like, here's all the verses I never heard growing up.
I saw that. That was great. I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it wild? Wild. I don't know. Somebody messaged me. They're like, what are you talking about? You heard those verses. I was like, no, I didn't. And they certainly weren't preached on.
Yeah, I was going to say,
okay.
Yeah, they might've been passingly, or you read it somewhere, but when you're reading the scriptures, but yeah. Taught on. That's what you're getting
exactly.
At, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It never was. No one ever said to me, it would be good for some Christians to get wealthy. That, like, wealth, there are issues with wealth, but there's also issues with being a leader, right? There's all these strict rules for being a leader in the church because there is temptation for when you have power, when you have leadership, when you're in front of people, like there's all these different temptations, and wealth is one of those. But I never heard the verse, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that resonates with my soul. I desire that. Like God made me as a man to desire to leave an inheritance for my children's children. And that is so many things, right? It's not just money. It's an inheritance of values. It's an inheritance of love, right? It's so many things. But inheritance, that is a financial word, right? So let's not take out like leaving an inheritance of values and all these different things. That's beautiful. And that should, and an inheritance of faith, but inheritance, that's a financial word. So when I think about that, I'm like, it's so orange pilling to be like, given what we know about the finances of the world right now, it's just leaving an inheritance for your kids is Bitcoin, dude. It's like one word.
Yeah. So, dude,
you feel that way?
I feel that. Yeah. 100%. I mean, that's a great way to say it. My kids, they love talking about Bitcoin, and it's triggered so many different conversations around finance, like just this regular topic of conversation that happens around our dinner table. Because that'll probably come up tonight, right? My kids are going to ask, "Oh, Dad, what did you do today?" I'm going to say, "Oh, I did this guy's, podcast. We talked about Bitcoin," and so the kids are going to. How do you really know that there's only 21 million? Or they're going to say, how do you really, whatever. Like they're going to ask great questions about Bitcoin. But it's like, it's a mechanism through which to discuss things. I think the same way you can, it's much more profound because money speaks to the core. It matters to everybody. But, I have friends that it's like, man, I can't talk to them about anything. If I want to talk to them and like have a deep conversation, I've got to start off with sports. Like you have to start off with like, well, hey man, how was the game last night? And it's like, I'm not even really into sports, but it's like, you got to talk about something that they care about. Well, that's what's beautiful about Bitcoin is because it literally cuts to the heart of everybody. People want to know because if you have financial security, you feel a little more confident about tomorrow. If you have financial worry, you're concerned about tomorrow, right? And so both sides of that equation, people want to talk to. And so, man, I think that's a great way to say it is that like leaving an inheritance for your children's children is Bitcoin. I mean, it really is. And like you said, there's so much wrapped up into that, but I think there's a lot wrapped up into the term Bitcoin. Like we talked about before, it comes with more than just money. It's a way of living in the world that's being awake to the devil's schemes and the way that he's trying to entrap you. And so I praise God that he gave us a form of money that empowers us to think differently.
Yeah. Do you have any resistance to in your heart I'm sure people say this stuff to you, but like that it wasn't founded by Christians, that, like America was founded by primarily Christian, Bible believing Christian people. So you're like, you can kind of like say, I believe in America. There's a lot that I believe about, and there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of ways we've jumped the shark. We're really off the path here. But do you have resistance to that, or is it, obviously God uses things that are created by non-believers, right? But what do you? How do you kind of wrestle with that?
I mean, I don't think I get that too often as an objection, but I think if I were to get that, I would probably give the same answer that I give, and I have a longer version of this in Bitcoin Evangelism. It's in the end, it's probably the most fun section of the book because it's uncommon or short answers to uncommon questions of Bitcoin. Because like the whole first part of the book is like here's what decentralization means and consensus and all those types of things. But then the last questions are like the random ones you get from people at church, like. In 2 months, my men's Bible study is going to start to go through the book of Revelation. So I know that this is going to come up, the one world currency and Bitcoin being the, Christians being, is this the money of the Antichrist? And I'd say actually it's not. It's probably the solution to the money of the Antichrist. I'd say there's a much stronger case to be made for the dollar being that, right? And just think about the history of the world and how it's oriented to this moment in history. And I don't even know if this is the case, but I'm just going to try and make this case. It's like, when did the dollar had existed, but it exists in its current form really at the end of World War I and World War II, which is kind of one war. Like if you think about it, you can really put World War I and World War II into one epic long war, which is the deadliest century in human history. It's the most deadly war in human history, the most vast, most destructive. Bombs were dropped that annihilated hundreds of thousands of people in a give and go, right? At the end of that devastating worldwide war, a new monetary system emerges called the Bretton Woods Agreement for the US dollar. And that's when the world adopts. So there was a one world currency after the greatest war in human history. It's called the US dollar. It's an inherently destructive, all the points we've made already. It's inherently opaque. It's inherently corrupt. It's not a good form of money that's been pushed around the world. And it's used to enslave people, right? And then fast forward to 2009, we enter this digital era where people are starting to talk about CBDC. Well, this before CBDCs, but it was digital dollars, digital versions of the dollar. This is before Bitcoin even, and so that you'll only be able to use the dollar if you have certain social credit scores and things like that. And we're seeing that in other countries, right? China certainly uses social credit scores. So that, I mean, you're almost lining up perfectly, making the case for the dollar being the whatever the beast's one world currency would be. There would be that case, which anyways, but then why would Bitcoin be the solution to that? Well, everything that's wrong with the dollar and that antichrist's currency that's corrupting the world, Bitcoin's the opposite. Again, it's honest, it's fair, it's transparent. It's censorship resistant. So the Antichrist himself and his powers and his institutions can't abuse it. They can't hack it. They can't stop it. And just even making kind of a cheeky joke about it, but it's like, what was the first nation who adopted Bitcoin as its own sovereign currency? Well, the first nation was El Salvador. And it's like literally translates to the savior. So the first country that adopts Bitcoin is named after Christ. And
wow, never thought about that.
Is it God's money? I don't know. I don't even know if I believe that the Antichrist will have a one world currency. I know it says you can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast. So that kind of implies that there's this one world currency. But if there ends up being if the dollar is that one world currency, I think that Bitcoin is God's provision to that problem.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this either, but my gut tells me that if there were to be a system that it would be run by governments, and this is not, and there's one world government, and so it would be a government digital dollar, digital money that's made by the government, which is happening, right? I mean that's in the works. So it would be that more, and it would also be the chip. So getting the chip. So those two things, that feels like the mechanism, and Bitcoin feels outside of that system where, I mean, the simple fact is you need to put your value somewhere, right? You go out and work in the world and you do things in the world and you get value back, which is right now, most of this audience would be dollars, right? Or the local currency. You get that's what you get back. And that is not holding its value. You won't be able to buy the same amount of stuff with that dollar if you put it under your mattress or you put it in a bank account. Even worse, you put it in a bank account because then they're lending it to somebody else. And so you can't even go take it out. And there could be a point in time where they just shut off the banks, right? We've seen that. There's like echoes of that already. So Bitcoin is the solution where you're pulling it out of that system. And yes, it's volatile. It's becoming less and less volatile. But if you zoom out, Bitcoin has grown, what is it, like 100? If you zoom out 7 years or something, it's grown 100% per year. I mean, it's insane. So, and the reason it's done so well is because all of the other currencies are doing so poorly, right? It's like, it's in comparison. So, like if you look at I saw this stat yesterday, if you look at the price of a house in dollars versus Bitcoin for the last like few years, right? It's like, it would have cost 30 Bitcoin to buy the same house, 5 years ago, and now it only costs 3.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So it's insane. So that's why it's a great, and Brian and I don't know everything, but we're reading the room, right? We have our, like Jesus said, if you have ears to hear, listen. You need to be looking. This is not a time, men like us at our age, 30 to 50 years old, we're like, it is time to open your eyes. It is time that, like, people will get left behind, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But don't you believe, Brian, that we're headed toward some kind of reset? And maybe I don't know what your timeline is on that, but like, there will be a major crisis of some kind, right? And we're going to go into a depression, or something is going to happen, right? They're printing money at a rate that makes no sense. That's not going to work. There's going to be a cliff. I'd love to just hear what your thoughts are on this, because this is part of the whole reason Bitcoin will win so big, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the sad state of affairs is that, yeah, do Judson and I know everything? No, but we've probably also studied history to some extent, and these are just recurring themes. There's nothing new under the sun, as the book of Ecclesiastes says. And so that biblical wisdom, how do we apply that to now? Like, knowing that there's nothing new, right? All the themes of history, that's why Jordan Peterson has become so popular. Even if he's not a genuine Christian, he's taking biblical themes and he's saying, hey, these are the themes that are recurring. These are the personality types that are recurring. And so that's been eye-opening thing, I think, for a lot of Christians is that's an interesting way to kind of analyze the world through a biblical lens, is that, yes, we understand that, okay, what in the past is going to recur today? And when it comes to money, is that we always see financial resets because 100%, and I don't want to like understate this, anybody in the audience, 100% of government currencies, or you want to call them fiat currencies, or you want to call them, non-commodity backed currencies, 100% of them fail. And every time the world has gone on these fiat standards, or they went from sound money, which is like gold, and then they start to water it down with cheap metals, which is the same thing that we're kind of seeing now with fiat currencies. There's financial reset, and with financial reset, they don't go silently into that good night. Like when a government or when a country is losing its grasp, its chokehold on world power, it doesn't just default on its money and say, we screwed up, let's start over and let's build back. No, they usually tend to be the most powerful in terms of military. They tend to be the most powerful in terms of technology. And so they do whatever they can to hold on to that power. And that's why it's not just a financial reset. It tends to be systemic reset. Now, sometimes that means wars. Sometimes that means famine. Sometimes that means, economic collapse in the sense that there's long depressions and things like that. Whether you're going back to the Roman times, whether you go back to different Egyptian resets that happened, you go back to the Middle Ages, you come to the Great British reset when they used to be the economic superpower, and then that kind of leads into the time of World War I. As we're going away from a Great British worldwide standard of them being the most powerful navy in the world and them kind of policing the world and everybody being on a Great British pound standard. And then we go into the World Wars era where the U.S. emerges as kind of the preeminent world standard. There tends to be these things that pair together with financial resets and systemic change. And so I don't say that for people to be worried that like World War III is going to happen, because it doesn't always happen the same way. Like I said, it can take place in different ways. But when financial reset happens, there's tremendous opportunity, because the ones that see around the corners and that see the reset that's going to happen, they can act accordingly. The only people that get hurt by the financial resets are the people who don't see it coming, the people that are trying to play catch up. Those are the ones that end up living hand to mouth because they were sidelined. They didn't prep accordingly. And we're kind of seeing a convergence of several major factors. I think I think governments are convinced that all of their financial woes are going to be a little bit different this time. They think that, yes, we really screwed up, but technology is going to make up for it. Trump says this all the time. I voted for Trump. I support Trump, in most of what I wouldn't say most, in many of the things that he does. But he says, we're going to grow our way out of this $37 trillion debt. we're not. Like, I know AI is going to improve our GDP and things like that, but there's going to be a financial reckoning. So even if you're a Trump guy and you're saying Trump says we're going to grow out of this, the math doesn't math when it comes to that. There's even with tremendous increases in productivity, we're going to get job losses, of course, with like, regular basic labor roles and things like that. So for every benefit we get economically from AI, we're going to get maybe some financial detriment. I think in the long term, technology tends to improve living conditions and stuff. But nonetheless, there has to be an economic reset. And that's how governments that get into $37 trillion of debt, or they get into these unsustainable debts, that's how they get out of those debts. It's like governments have this nuclear option that, and I don't mean like nuclear in terms of nuclear bomb, but they just have this complete reset option of debasing their currency to the point of where $37 trillion is just not that much money to pay back. That sounds absurd, but if you go back to Weimar Germany after World War I, they had what was considered an unpayable debt after World War I, which was 60 billion. It was the equivalent of 60 billion US dollars. I forget what it was in German marks, but how did they pay that off? And it was based in German marks though. So the beautiful part for them was they could pay this money back, their war reparations from World War I. They had to raise $60 billion. So that was a lot of money in those days. But by the time their 4-year hyperinflation cycle ended, their smallest unit of currency was a 1 trillion mark note. So their smallest unit of currency, like that unpayable debt, that $60 billion of debt, I forget again in German marks, I think it was something that it was like 600 million marks at the time, right? So they owed 600 million marks, or excuse me, 600 billion marks. Their smallest unit of currency, it made it so that it was only like 60 cents to pay off your national debt by the time their hyperinflation cycle worked. And so that sounds absurd that all of the expenses that they accrued from World War I and all the penalties that they accrued from World War I ended up being paid off with less than their smallest unit of currency. That's not hyperbole. That's what actually happened. Now, again, is that type of hyperinflation going to play out in the US? I don't know if it's going to play out to that degree, but we definitely will have inflation, and it'll be earth-shaking inflation. It'll be inflation enough to where you're not going to want to deal with US dollars anymore. So you can either accept Bitcoin and gold and those types of fixed assets. You can either accept them now, or you can accept them once the value's inflated because people are running from US dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been getting more into gold as well, and for the similar reasons as Bitcoin. Because I was listening to Ray Dalio talking about real estate, and he was like, because real estate's the other one, right? Where it's like, real estate is a good opportunity because it's a fixed asset. It's, something tangible. But the problem with real estate is they can just increase your tax on that however they want. And by the way, most of us have mortgages, and so they can just get funny with the mortgages as well. Right. They can just lock up the money that you have in the mortgage if you haven't paid it off. So really that makes Bitcoin even more essential, for people. So, we've gone on for a while now. I would love to have a quick end here where, we get a little bit practical with, what people can do. So what would you suggest other than, starting to, buy Bitcoin? And, you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You can buy pieces of Bitcoin, like you can even buy it through Venmo or PayPal now. It's very, very doable. But what would you suggest, Brian? And I would love to know kind of how you think about, that for people. And also, do you own other coins?
I don't own other coins. I used to. I'm what you call a Bitcoin maximalist now. I talk about that a little bit in Bitcoin Evangelism. Now, Bitcoin Evangelism is probably the nicest Bitcoin maximalist book to altcoins. I explain altcoins in there. I explain what DeFi and just again what kind of generally what are the general terms to understand what altcoins are. But I believe that Bitcoin's the only truly decentralized protocol that we have out there. I think that most altcoins are perhaps interesting technologies. There may be interesting applications of the technology. But as far as where I want to store my money, I think Bitcoin is kind of the preeminent digital asset for that. And that's the conclusion I've come over, over the last 10 years. I went through a pretty hard altcoin phase. And so I would have given you a very different answer 5 years ago. But where I sit today, I would be a Bitcoin maximalist. Now, as far as if you're somebody who started in Bitcoin, yeah, I mean, if you haven't started, the easiest thing is just to buy $100 of Bitcoin. And I tell people, like, don't even do anything else. Just like buy $100, because that's very easy to kind of understand the fluctuations in Bitcoin. Oh, my $100 is now $110. It's now $90. You can track it that way. So small wins are huge. And then once you've sat on that $100 for a while, then, buy $100 a week, buy $1,000 a week, whatever fits into your budget, right? And just dollar cost average in that way. That's very easy for somebody to get off of zero. Like the advice is very easy. Don't go and trade Bitcoin. Don't go and leverage Bitcoin. Just every dollar you turn into Bitcoin, instead of that dollar losing buying power over time, the Bitcoin's going to gain buying power over time. The equation's pretty easy there. Now, for the person who's in Bitcoin and they're looking for like what is next, I'm looking around the corner. I see financial collapse happening, but I want to stack as much Bitcoin as I can. I want to build and participate in Bitcoin. I think it's important, and I've given this answer before, so sorry, pardon me if anybody's heard it, but I think it's really important to understand the 4 stages of monetary adoption. I'll try to breeze through them, but the first stage is novelty. So things that become monetary standards, they always start off in a novelty phase. So even gold, you go back far enough in time, there was a time when nobody held gold because it was valuable. They would have dug it out of the ground and they're like, wow, this thing's beautiful. I'm going to give it to my wife because that's going to make my wife really happy. I gave her this shiny rock and it's a novelty. Nobody would have given you money for it. Nobody would have bartered for it. It just was this cool, shiny object. Then enough people in society saw this cool, shiny object and other people holding this cool, shiny object that all of a sudden people wanted it. And then that's when gold entered its store of value phase. That's the second phase of money. Things go from a novelty to a store of value. Now we're clearly in the store of value phase with Bitcoin. If you go back 10 years, Bitcoin was clearly a novelty. You used to be able to go to bitcoinfaucet.com. For anybody that doesn't know, you're going to kick yourself because you're going to think, what was I doing in 2010? Certainly, I had 30 seconds per day to go to this website. If you clicked this button and solved the CAPTCHA, you would get 5 Bitcoin every day that you did that. So you could get 5 Bitcoin just for going to this website. Clearly, in 2010, Bitcoin was just a novelty for somebody to just give you 5 Bitcoin every day. Today, that's worth $550,000 if you were to do that, because it's now entered the store of value phase. The next phase is medium of exchange. Money goes from store of value. Enough people hold gold that we see, oh my gosh, this guy's holding gold. My other friend is holding gold because it retains its value. Now it's enough people have it that we don't have to get out of gold to get the cow that I want, or I don't have to get out of gold in order to buy the land that I want. I don't have to trade it for salt so that I can use salt to buy the land because that's the currency or whatever. I can just use gold to buy the land, right? That's when it becomes a medium of exchange. That's the next phase of money, and people start to shave off little pieces of gold to use for smaller transactions and that sort of thing. The fourth phase of money is the unit of account. That's when you get to a gold standard. That's when other things are backed by gold, when other things are accounted for, when your company keeps its books in gold. Like, we might take salt for payment, but we use gold because it's the best standard to keep our monthly or annual logs in. Okay, that's the life cycle of money. And so if we are clearly in stage 2, the store of value phase of Bitcoin, well, you and I talked about this a bunch. What is looking ahead? What does it mean to look ahead in Bitcoin? Well, looking ahead at the next phase is the medium of exchange phase. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Those people who are participating and helping build the parallel Bitcoin economy, and you made this point earlier, is that it's like it almost feels like we're in this parallel system, right? There's the old fiat system, and then there's us Bitcoiners, Christians that are kind of running parallel to society. That's why my second book is called Parallel, because I think that that's absolutely the case. And for us to get engrossed in and participate in building that parallel system, that parallel economy, that's where the alpha is. That's where the growth happens. And that's how you get ahead. Like I mentioned, there's this weird paradoxical thing that happens, that the more you spend Bitcoin, it tends to give you more economic connections with people who spend Bitcoin. And then those people turn around and spend Bitcoin with you. It plugs you into that economy. And if you do something where people pay you in fiat, then certainly somebody will pay you in Bitcoin to do that same job. So I would say you don't even need to spend Bitcoin, because that makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I'd say just tell the world you accept Bitcoin. And guess what? Once you start accepting Bitcoin, I think you'll probably start spending Bitcoin, because you'll see the value of making those economic connections. It's like being a part of a club and going around and networking with everybody there. Well, who are the people that I want to network with in terms of a business sense? The people that I believe that 5 years from now, 10 years from now will have the greatest buying power are not going to be the people that are tied to that sinking ship they were talking about, that people that are subject to that financial reset. The people with the greatest buying power 5, 10 years from now are going to be Bitcoiners. I want as many economic connections with Bitcoiners as I can possibly have. Because if the government tells me I need to feed my kids cricket food because that's the new government mandate, well, guess what? If I shook a rancher's hand and I used Bitcoin to buy beef from him before, guess what? My kids don't have to eat cricket food. So because I made that economic connection. That's the very dark future. But what about the very bright future? Well, say everything's sunshine and rainbows, but Bitcoin just becomes the monetary standard of tomorrow. Well, guess what? Who were the guys that bet on the internet economy? The guys that didn't just buy and hold domain names. Like we were talking about Bezos, we were talking about Elon Musk. Those guys built the internet economy. They built Amazon, e-commerce. I mean, you built the e-commerce, right? Like there's guys that did that. There's, Elon Musk with PayPal. They didn't just buy business.com and turn around and flip it for $10 million. That would have been a good financial move, sure. But if you wanted to build billions of dollars of wealth, you were thinking about building the rails for the internet economy. And that's what I think, if people want to get ahead in Bitcoin and outpace the rest of the market, I would say there's a lot of temptation to try and find small cap altcoins that are going to go up 10x. I would say your time and your focus and your monetary energy would be better spent taking that energy and focusing it on the Bitcoin parallel economy. That's just my 2 cents, though.
I love it. That's the Bitcoin maximalist. It's funny because the other investments I've made over the years or whatever, I've looked at the money that I put into Bitcoin, and I go back and I look a year ago or whatever, and I'm like, shoot, I should have just put all that into Bitcoin. It's have you heard Gary Cardone, Grant's brother? Have you heard him talk about Bitcoin much?
I mean, I've heard him talk about it, but not in this context necessarily. No.
Yeah, he's got a great perspective where he's just like we're gonna look back at this time where it's an all-time high yesterday. Bitcoin was at 125, right? And it went down this morning. But it's going to get to $1 million per coin within a couple of years, maybe 5. What do you think?
I'm so bullish. I think it's the next 3 years, under 3 years probably. But
yeah, so if you think about that, I mean that is, you cannot get that return anywhere. Start a business, invest in the stock market, real estate. It's just not even close. And so it's an opportunity of a lifetime. We're at a time in its cycle where it's the safest it's ever been, as we said. And it's just time for people to start doing the research. Read Brian's book, read the Bitcoin Standard, listen to podcasts. There's all kinds of amazing places. Wait, so you have an app or something, right, for people connecting with other Bitcoiners? Is that true?
Yeah. So, I mean, people can find other Bitcoiners on X, or they can go on like Primal, like Noster and that type of thing. But it's hard to find other Bitcoiners in real life. So that's all we do at Orange Pill App. It's a social network for people to find the Bitcoiners in their neighborhood, or if you're traveling to a conference, you can find all the events associated with that conference. So if you think, our core competency is just that. It's Bitcoiners meeting in real life. So if you need a tool to facilitate meeting other Bitcoiners in person, that's exactly what we do.
I love it. So get Brian's book, check out the Orange Pill app. And there's so many other things. There's so many other rabbit holes we could go down. I want to talk about wealth in the Christian life and what you think about that, and the resistance toward having resources as a Christian, and how we have to kind of like fight that fight, and the benefits of it, obviously the pitfalls of it as well. Maybe I'll have you back sometime so we can chat about that.
That'd be great.
Because we're at an hour and a half now, and
I flew by.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was epic, dude.
Dude, I had a great time. Yeah, we could go for hours. I'm sure if we didn't have other stuff to do, I would sit down for another 2 hours, man. It was awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining another episode of The Download. Remember, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all the rest. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the rest will be given to you. That's the pod. Okay. So